Welcome everybody. This is Brookside Chats with Brooklyn,
Your co-host here, Taco.
And I'm Kumba.
and today's topic is censorship. So, in your mind, guys, what would you say is a good example of censorship or a good stuff that needs to be censored with like media?
Well, I mean, if you look at what's traditionally been censored in the U.S., because it's very different across the world, there are certain words, profanity, that's censored on main TV. There's still places where you'll catch it, but you usually got a different rating for it. There's certain images, stuff you can and can't show on TV. So that's what I think of when I think of censorship.
Yeah, for me, like when I think of censorship, I really think of like stuff just like TV, the FCC. I know a very interesting topic that's been, or kind of like a battle or like fighting words has been talking about is like freedom of speech and like the section 230 of the Communications Act. And I think with it is that like you have to understand what is our definition of like what is like the controversial like material that needs to be censored, compare and contrast, and what ideas are allowed to be censored. Because I assume like what needs to be censored is like Nazi ideology or kind of the disinformation with all the like anti-vaxxers and or like the election controversial takes.
Yeah, and we'll get back to that because that's a good point. But Kumba, what's your thought, or like what do you think? What comes to mind when you think of censorship?
With censorship, I do think that it does change over time because there are things that have been censored in the past that we wouldn't find controversial like now. Because I know something that would have been bad would be like, I know they try to like censor Elvis Presley, for example, which isn't really like when he would dance. They literally try to like film from the top up because they thought that his dance moves were too ludicrous or too out there. And I know that a lot of books from the past have been censored or like not published or put in libraries because of the things that were in it, like To Kill a Mockingbird, for example, or Huckleberry Finn, things like that. So I think that it does change over time. So like things now that are like censored or controversial might not be the same way in future years.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. This was actually a case in the Supreme Court involving the patent office and this. Can't remember where this guy was from, but he had a clothing business, and I believe that he wanted to brand his clothes with the word F, a variation of FUCK, but it wasn't spelled like that. It was spelled differently. So he wanted to get it trademarked. He took it to the trademark or the patent office, and they rejected it on the ground that it was immoral and offensive. So he took it to the Supreme Court, and he ended up winning, if I recall, because the argument was that what some people find to be offensive or immoral is not the same as what other people find to be offensive and immoral, and that changes over time. Like you were talking about, those books back in the day were published, people don't have an issue with it, but as time changes, the society changes, they adapt a different ideology on what is acceptable and what isn't. So that's a good example.
How long ago was that Supreme Court case?
It was very recent, I think within the last 5 years.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I cannot remember the case, but it was very recent. Yeah.
That's weird.
So I think like another interesting example of like all these different cases of like censorship is just or something that kind of relates to all that censorship or particular that media is the FCC. They have a statement that says like according to them like around the times of 6 a.m. to like 10 p.m. there needs to be kind of like some certain guidelines and kind of like limits of like what can be played, because that's when like children are like watching TV typically, so they don't kind of want to like, I guess, corrupt you with like F-bombs and you know, nudity and stuff like that, because for the children.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I know Cartoon Network did have like, not Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon. They had Nick at Night for like older people, and then during the day it was more like Tom and Jerry and stuff like that.
It's the same way with like, actually Cartoon Network is a good example too, because you got Adult Swim, which is also the late at night version.
Adult Swim is wild. Robot Chicken, remember that?
Oh yeah.
I was 8 years old watching that. I don't know how I got away with it. Now looking back at it, nope.
Dude, Adult Swim was the thing that made me into a weeb with they like introduced like Naruto and like Bleach and all those like classic anime like trope shows that you like always hear about or always see about.
But is that censorship though? Because censorship, when I think of censorship, is you're trying to censor it in general from.
I mean, that could be like a minor example, but I know that censorship can go to like a further extent. Like something, I don't know, like Cuba right now, there's like protests and stuff, and that's really censored because the government doesn't want that kind of information getting out, I guess. So like a Cartoon Network thing is minor, but then it does get to a broader point where they are censoring more important things.
Well, I'm actually on their website right now, and
Cubas?
No. Yeah, just the entire Cuban like government, but reflecting back with the FCC, yeah, they're like a government like provision, and they are like trying to like do a certain kind of amount of censoring, so it's not like really explicit material during the day on like peak hours or peak watching hours for kids. So
yeah, that makes sense.
But I guess then, as well as that, like what if like you're on like, you know, an explicit channel and you have like the warnings and signs, like, you know, does the FCC have the jurisdiction to kind of be like, you know, nope, you can't post any of that, because is it the broadcaster's right to like be limited on like what they post or what they show for those particular hours, or can they just like throw in a label and then that way they can kind of show what they need to show? Because for instance, like I'm starting to see it now with like modern day social media, especially with Facebook, is that you kind of have like those warnings when it says like, oh, this is explicit material, and before they actually like show it, they'll have like this blurred image and say like, are you 18? Which, to be honest, you can't really, I doubt most kids like check on stuff that like are 18 are actually of 18.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's kind of a very loose restriction, but they're just like, hey, don't do it, kid. And they're like, kids like, sure, check.
Sure, boss. Yeah. I found that the case that I was talking about, it's actually, I think, decided in 2019, so it's very recent. That the shirt was, the brand was FUCT.
Okay.
So they deemed that to be more on the scandalous.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, so what's your argument, or what's the point you're trying to explore today? Are you saying like, do we need more censorship? Is censorship bad? Should it all be uncensored?
Well, I guess like I always keep seeing this argument of, for instance, like now you're seeing a lot of social media, like, is it really limiting our right for free speech when you have certain amounts of censorship? Because free speech protects the government's ability to punish you for your speech. But if like the censorship from the government, is that really hurting your free speech though, or hurting you or punishing you?
Here's the point with that, and it's just from what I've looked at and from what I've read, you got to differentiate free speech, your First Amendment rights, when you're talking about it with social media, because Twitter, Facebook, all these companies are private.
Correct.
Freedom of speech, the First Amendment only protects you from the government. It does not protect you from private companies. So Twitter can block you all they want. You can't go to the government and be like, I'm blocked. It's just, that's not gonna happen because it's a private company. Now, if Twitter was run by the government, then you could, say something about it. But the First Amendment does not protect you against private parties.
And would you say, like, also as well as that, you kind of want a certain amount of like censorship with some amount with like these platforms as well, because maybe some people can take a lot of like disinformation or misinformation and use that to kind of cause public panic. For instance, I know there was a bit of a mass hysteria incident a couple years ago with like this kind of bunch of clown videos, and people kind of panicked about that, thought like clowns are going to go after them. I know it sounds dumb, but
yeah, I remember
talking about now, like it's that hindsight, it sounds dumb, but it did kind of cause like a big mass panic. And then as well as that, what about misinformation, like the election like controversy with like all like, oh, the election's rigged, oh, there's secret ballots being funneled in this place and that place, or with instance the vaccines causing magnetism or whatever.
I tested it, it did stick on me. But it also stuck on my dad, and he hadn't had the vaccine, so maybe we're just magnetic by nature.
Yeah, there we go. Magneto. We can take him on.
Magneto, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, like, I think there should be, like, a certain amount of censorship, because sometimes, like, even as simple as, like, those simple misinformation, it does kind of, like, influence us and help promote negative ideas. So a good instance, I would say, for, like, these negative ideas could be just like what you see with like your grand or your aunt just posting some clickbait article, or like you're just fake news, as some people call them. But like, I mean, how much of these articles are really monitored though?
So do you guys think with like censorship, should it be more like, I know companies, they're private, so should companies be in charge of these censorships, or do you think it should go to like a government level? That's, I don't know. I feel like it's businesses, so that they're in charge of these things, so you can't really, what do you guys think?
Well, I think like I said, the First Amendment and the freedom of speech is there to protect you from the government. So if you then have the government coming up to these companies and forcing them to censor certain items, then that's the government infringing on your rights. I would feel like, I don't know if that argument could be made in court, but I think any censorship or keeping, moderation on these platforms, moderating that's up to the company. And then they need to be doing a better job of it, but the pressure should come from the people, their customers. I don't think it should come straight from the government, because again, then you get into that gray space of who's really censoring. Is it the private company, or is it the government that's censoring, and what's the real objective with it? So I think through activism and through pressure, it should be coming from the customers and not from the government.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think a better question would be,
what can companies do themselves to like sometimes monitor these?
Censoring, and we were talking about this earlier, it's very subjective what you're trying to censor. So who, as a company, who are they to determine if it's offensive or it goes against their policies? I guess they have a policy, and I guess if you're a user, you're agreeing to that policy. But again, like, I might find the post offensive, you might not find it offensive. I have just as much right to view it as you have to not view it. So who is the company going to listen to?
I think it's just kind of like also kind of looks at like the atmosphere around us, because the social media world is not like a heavy blanket to the real world. Like, it's reflection upon like each another, because with social media it was a catalyst for, say, for instance, the Arab Spring revolutions, with removing the president of Tunisia, and as well as that what you see with like the Syrian civil war, and like all these different like pro-democratic like ideas kind of being spread on social media.
Right.
On the other hand, though, what about hate speech though? Like, if you're head of a CEO of these, like, you know, these companies, and somebody says, I hate blank people, do you really want that, like, on your platform? And I get it. And does that really, like, does that type of free speech also, like, reflect on you as an individual as well? Because if I recall, kind of like something kind of similar instance would be kind of like, you know, what Tumblr used to be, when they had, like, all the, like, pornographic images and stuff like that, and they had kind of that weird vibe, and eventually they removed all that on their platform because they didn't want that, like, image, and they kind of wanted to kind of separate that out. And something similar of that is happening with, like, OnlyFans, after trying to, like,
I got an ad from OnlyFans on YouTube. It was for cooking. I think it was like a cooking channel on their platform.
Yeah, like,
I was like, what?
all your fitness tips. And I'm like, really? Man, do you think they'll still allow feet pics?
You're gonna have to find your source somewhere else.
No, I was just gonna sell feet pics.
Oh, God.
Hey, it pays rent, okay?
I would not buy either. Nope.
Okay. Even if I have cool socks on them?
You can sell sock pics. You got a cool collection of socks. You got that going for you, but that's about it.
Oh, man. There goes my other business opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, goodbye. So, who do you think, like, when it comes to this, and, you know, companies, do you think it reflects badly on the company when an individual on their platform posts hate speech or something that's untasteful? Do you think that the company is, you know, promoting that by keeping it on? Do you think they should take it off, or do you think they should leave it on there? You know, is it violating the individual's freedom of speech, even if it's not protected technically?
I do think that it actually it does not reflect on the company at all, but it reflects the person and who they are as a person, obviously. But I do think that they should take an approach to try to, I don't know. Yeah, I do think things like that should be taken down. And I know a certain somebody was censored on Twitter, and I think that was the right move, because he was saying things like, I applaud your bravery for destruction and hate and all this other stuff he was going on about. So I do think there was a point where you do have to kind of shut that down.
Right.
I don't know if they needed to shut him down permanently, because he doesn't have access to that account anymore. But I mean, if it's not on their platform, they're gonna go ahead and use another platform.
And a couple platforms have sprung since then. You know, you have Parler, and then there's the new one that just came out recently. But that's another important distinction that a lot of people look at is, you might say something like, I hate Brooke, I can't stand that guy. That's
Same.
an opinion. You can leave that up there. But if you're threatening to, you know, I'm gonna throw Brooke off the balcony, that's an intentional, that's inciting. You live on the third floor. I would never. But that's different. That's, you know, that's almost a call to action.
Exactly.
You know, like,
so you're talking about action as compared to, like, just talking.
And
how it's perceived. Some people might perceive it as inciting violence, like what you were talking about with that certain individual who shall not be named.
He who shall not be named.
Yes, and we're not talking about Voldemort.
So I know you guys don't want to give the name to that certain individual, but there is something that I do think, like, there is, like, a government overreach at that point, when there is, like, you know, action that is kind of being performed. And
how can you explain that, government overreach?
So with the FBI, a lot with like the January 6th riot, insurrection, whatever.
Insurrection would be correct.
Okay. Whatever people want to label it as, fun parade to some right-winged
Love
jobs.
fest.
But a lot of these right wing, the people inside of them were posting all that like content to social media, and that's how the FBI actually came and found all these people. And I wonder if like when you step out of lines, or if they use like, you know, that like information on your social media, is that like something that's a part of like the Patriot Act? Because I know with the Patriot Act, they can like hotkey like certain individuals that are trying to find like, you know, or like use explosives, and they caught like I think some guy that was trying to attempt to like bomb a particular like public like square
Venue.
public space.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they can use that, of
Mhm.
course. I mean, you might not like the idea, but they're doing way worse stuff than just looking up your Facebook profile.
Mhm.
They're doing some, you know, some
FBI.
deep digging on everyone. They're listening to this.
FBI, please sponsor us.
Give us a like, subscribe.
Mm-hmm. I need the attention.
Notice him, senpai.
When the FBI doesn't even notice you. That's how lonely your life is. But as well as that, that's in like the US as well. I do think like what about like say something like international, and like on the opposite end of the spectrum, like, you know, Myanmar, where there was a lot of hate speech that was going on against their Muslim minority, and then eventually there was a lot of like hate crimes that were committed to the Muslim minority, where you could possibly categorize this as like genocide, and then like Mark Zuckerberg was just kind of like being awkward about it and being like, oh well, yeah, that was bad, we'll try and do something about that. And there needs to be some amount of like either like censorship by that company, because do you really want your company to be like used as a platform for like committing these hate crimes? Because if you recall with like the 1940s with like, you know, the Holocaust, radio was a very common tool to like organize a lot of like hate speech, and then from hate speech you had action. So what's the line the limit, and can you prevent that in that case? So it's only a company, and you have how many users online, so how much can you actually like monitor?
Oh, that's my point. You know, you have Facebook, and you're saying that they've been using Facebook in countries like Myanmar and others to organize and commit all these war crimes. That's what they're doing over there. But I mean, how much can Facebook really do? They can do quite a bit if they really wanted to, but they won't.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because it's out of the U.S. It's out of the U.S.'s jurisdiction.
Yeah.
In Myanmar, it's not going to tell them anything.
Mm-hmm.
And the internet's free. Also, you got to remember that. If they get blocked from Facebook, 10 more sites will pop up. They'll go on 8chan. They'll go on 4chan, 3chan, 2chan, wherever. Like, there's ways that they'll organize. They got WhatsApp. Like, that's huge over there in that part of the world. They're using that to organize misinformation campaigns in India as well on COVID and the vaccinations and whatnot. They're using that to organize in Turkey and a bunch of other places to attack a certain group or to spread misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sorry,
Go
but
ahead.
if they do move to another platform, it's gonna be the same thing, like you were saying. And even if you kick them off your platform, what if they just make another fake account?
They will.
So
Yeah.
there's really, I don't know, with censorship, it does come to the point like how much can you really censor? Because if it's not your platform, it's gonna be something else. So at that point, what can we even do about censorship?
You gotta take it a different approach, because like you were saying at the beginning of this recording is, you know, it's like those websites that ask you if you're 18. You're gonna lie. You're gonna say yeah. You're like you're 10 and you're gonna say yeah, I'm 18.
Just do like a photo ID or something like that.
Right. So Airbnb does that when you sign up for their account. You gotta take a picture of your ID.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So
But going back to, that might actually be this. No one would want to do that. I wouldn't want to do that. Screw that. But anyways, so with Myanmar and Facebook and in those cases, should Mark Zuckerberg and his company be held accountable for what's going on over there for being complacent? I don't know if you can do that. I would say yes, because they have the power to block certain things. But also, there's billions of people on Facebook, and there's only a couple thousand of Facebook workers that can sift through so much. So
yeah.
at the same time, it's like, no, you can't.
I wonder there could be like a hotkey, kind of like the same way,
People will get around it. They'll use keywords. They'll use tomato for kill or something. Like you wouldn't know. Essentially, you're gonna censor everyone. But
like the Rwanda genocide and cut the tall trees. That was a keyword for like starting it. So
exactly. So I think what the approach that needs to be taken with this is, well, there's a couple different things. Like the first one is censorship with like certain things you find offensive. If you follow an individual that says something that you don't agree with, unfollow them. That's the simplest thing. You could report them or do all that stuff, but like they're gonna be back. They're not gonna do anything about it. Just don't follow them. Ignore them.
Well,
Now,
what if it's not like a friend or something? What if it's a public figure, someone we can't really not look at or see or hear?
you can beg all you want. They're not gonna change their minds. That's the thing. That's it, they're gonna keep spewing their hate. They're gonna keep doing it. You can try and get them kicked off of the platform. Sometimes that's been successful, but a lot of times that hasn't been the case. It's not much you can do with that. Trying to think. I mean, you got the Tucker Carlsons, you got the Ann Cutlers out there. Like, you want to censor them, you want to kick them off, but they're not. They're gonna be on there, and if you do get them off of Twitter, they're just going Parler or somewhere else to continue their ideology.
I guess
so. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is, like Nick at Night or Adult Swim. It's a very minor censorship, but the point is, if you don't want your kids watching that, there's parental control. Just turn the TV off at 10 p.m. Like, do that. Don't go to the government and tell them, I don't like Adult Swim, man. Just do that. You have a self-accountability. Now, the most important part comes in with the misinformation campaigns. A lot of these are going on where in countries where people are new to this, to Facebook, to WhatsApp, to the internet, so they don't know how to respond to that information. So I think the biggest thing you can do is educate people. An educational campaign on how to spot fake articles, how to spot misinformation, and how to think for yourself. That's the biggest thing you can do there, because the internet's so big, you're not going to control it.
But like with Facebook, I think it's a little more interesting, because how would you like censor other people's posts, since like you're trying to like add your friends? Same with like Instagram, Twitter.
You block them.
So you're saying ultimately it's up to the individual to try to censor what they see on their timeline?
To a certain extent, you can't censor everyone, but if there's something that offends you from a like if Brooke says the Green Bay Packers suck and I'm offended, I'll be like blocked, and then I'll never see his post again. Now there's if Jim Carrey says that, he's a big figure, he's everywhere, but at least I won't see his posts. Like, I have a Twitter account. I don't follow anyone though. I mean, like personally, like friends, I don't follow any of them there. I follow like certain sites, and if there's ever like a individual that goes against my values or anything like that, I'll block them and I never see their posts again.
But if Jim Carrey says that and he's a public figure, so even though if you block Jim Carrey, people will still comment on it, so you'll still be seeing that. So are you gonna have to just block everyone who comments about Jim Carrey liking the Packers at that point?
Well, with that, it's always harder with public figures. Again, you can't get around them always. If you see it in your feed still, and I mean, ignore it, I guess. Ignorance is bliss at some point with some things. Like, there's other things that you cannot ignore, and there's definitely action that needs to be taken on.
Mm-hmm.
But there's things that are just not worth ruining your day over.
Yeah.
Like, there's different levels of that. There's some things that you can ignore, like if they say puppies suck, you can ignore that.
No, you're
But
getting blocked.
You're getting blocked? Yeah.
Just kidding.
But if someone's calling for a revolution and to attack minorities, then there are certain things that if you feel so inclined to do, you can do. Like report them, you can tweet back at them, you can send them a meme. I don't know what people do, but there are certain actions that you can take if you want to do that. I'm just saying, don't let someone ruin your day, and don't be a Karen. Don't, like, you have as much a right to your opinion on social media as the next person does.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, because if you're blocking someone out there for saying, you know, they hate puppies, and when you say I love tacos, they might hate tacos and they might go after you, don't be surprised. Now I'm using like really dumb examples, but you can substitute those with any other topic and that'll be the same.
I know I might cause a war because of saying this. I know the BTS or BTS army, like if you say anything negative about BTS, like they'll come after you because you have an opinion. But it's just like, as well as that, you just kind of need to be like respectful at a distance, and it doesn't need to be involved with like censorship and all that. But when actions can actually end up hurting people, like physically, mentally, psychologically,
that's when you get involved.
Yeah, because I know, you know, somebody might seeing multiple posts about like, oh, I hate immigrants and stuff like that. Like, that will psychologically affect people, and it can.
Yeah, last summer was tough with the whole Black Lives Matter things.
Oh, yeah.
I was seeing posts consistently. People had all these ideologies, and I had to literally block people because some people are just so ignorant. So sometimes you just have to do that to protect your peace of mind.
Definitely. I mean, you have the power to censor, and you have the power to create a very supportive ecosystem in your social media as well. Some people don't like blocking others that have a different ideology from them because they like to argue with them and explore.
I saw that. People were like, you should not be blocking people who have different ideologies. That's childish. Why don't you talk to them? I don't want to.
Exactly.
Because they're literally not going to change their mind, and I'm just going to keep going with someone who just doesn't care. So yeah, what's the point?
You gotta know what battles you can and can't win. Like, they're not gonna change their mind, and they're not losing anything. You're losing your peace of mind. You're losing your,
like, I'm getting upset about something I can't even change. So
right.
Yeah, censorship does come handy with that.
It does. Yeah, but there's no need to go to Facebook and be like, because then that just makes you worse when they don't do anything. There's another psychological layer to that when they don't do anything, because then you feel ignored. So the best thing you can just do is block them.
I guess another thing too, like censorship, like I'm kind of glad that it was only like Facebook is a separate company from the government, because think about like how he who shall not be named, like how
the orange one,
how his reaction to BLM.
Exactly.
And
that was a tough time as well.
But like even like the initial video of the death of George Floyd, would that be censored in a way?
Well, that's the tricky part, because if that was censored, then we would have never known, and the movement would never have gone where it was. Oh, you had a thought?
I forgot.
We'll come back to it. Yeah.
So deep in thought that you forgot your thought. Like I said with like just the hate crimes and like the misinformation, I do believe that misinformation can lead to like disastrous results, and can lead to like people taking things way out of context and starting to like actually like harm other people or go the far length. And I believe it was 1856, there was an Indian revolution where...
Was that organized on Facebook?
No, but it was organized by misinformation. Particularly, what was caused by it was this bullet that supposedly was covered with this like pig grease. And why that's by though is because this is a Muslim population along with the Hindu, which they don't eat beef or eat like are like have any like pork as well. So by licking that, they're defying their religion, and they don't want to defy their religion for those oppressors. So they had that rebellion to like go against, not like go use those particular type of arms, and it was all because of a rumor of it was covered in pig grease, and that was kind of like what set it off. Probably a more recent example would probably be like Kristallnachts with World War II, and how like it was the night of broken glass, and how like some Jewish guy murdered somebody, and that populace was saying like, oh, this is what the Jewish people are really up to, blah, this and that, and like all that anti-Semitic hate, and that's what kind of like started that, or that's what kind of really started escalating all the like we would get into the ghettos and the mass killings and stuff like that. So
I know during the Civil War, people were getting like jailed and hanged or whatever they were doing to torture people. But like newspapers, when they would publish articles about things they didn't like, they'd always end up like in jail or something. So I'm glad they're not doing that now, but it's still kind of scary that that kind of censorship was even there at some point in history.
And not that long ago either, relative.
yeah, I think it's just kind of like, well, not a lot of people want to say this, but like this during the Civil War time, the U.S. was a lot more like authoritarian. They would say to an extent, like, yeah, you had your elections, but like there was kind of like had a lot of crackdowns and stuff because you couldn't trust anyone at that point. Lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Couldn't trust anyone.
Yeah, can't trust my own brain. But as well as that, just I think an interesting topic we could also talk about is just kind of like freedom of press and like the censorship of that, and does freedom of press allow like misinformation, or like what's the like limit? Because I think like if you look at like technically The Onion, that is misinformation, but
it's understood to be satire.
It's satire. So if you can make it like dramatized, yeah, like then it's all good.
I mean, at that point, if you're reading The Onion and you believe it, you're kind of a dumbass. That's on you. You're
saying 9 million people didn't die on Black Tuesday last year?
Correct. Here's my thing with that. I feel like people need to learn how to distinguish better. Again, like there's just some things that people will eat up, and I'm just like, you gotta be an absolute idiot to believe it, and they believe it, and I'm just like, at that point, that's on you. Like
QA on stuff, like
that's on you. If you think that there's little micro robots in the vaccines and you don't want to get vaccinated and you get COVID, that's on you. I mean, I understand people who have genuine fears of vaccines and don't want to get vaccinated, but people that are saying they got little robots in there, or they'll turn you into a lizard or whatever it is that they're
turn into a zombie. There's gonna be a zombie apocalypse.
Zombie apocalypse. Like, if you get COVID and you die or you get like terribly sick, that's on you at this point. Like, I mean, people like really
aren't like most of the COVID deaths now because
unvaccinated.
Of like, unvaccinated. Yeah. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
But like, you know, and people who the clown stuff.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about, like, come on. Are you really killer clowns out there?
We were like 12. I believed it.
Well, yeah, you're 12.
I was still outside, but
you got 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds believing that stuff. Like at that point, like, I understand humanity is not the brightest, but like, come on. Like, use common sense, people. Humanity will survive on common sense. I lack common sense. Just to be out there, I'm not a genius. I'm dumb. I know speak good. I lack common sense. But
Yeah.
like I can think enough for myself to like do the research and not believe some guy that claims that John F. Kennedy Jr. is still alive.
The other thing too is like trying like to fight off misinformation as well. I think just people need to do like multiple like sources of research. If you're having like one single source that says like,
That's what
oh,
I'm saying.
like that's probably not real news right there. So, oh man.
That's what I'm saying. Education. That's.
Mm-hmm.
But some people just can't be educated. They won't allow it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm saying ignorance is bliss. Also, you gotta learn how to ignore some people.
Mm-hmm. But kind of wrapping things up, I personally still believe that like there should be a certain amount of censorship. Companies need to like also kind of crack down because you know hate crimes do happen, and I mean we can pretend that like there isn't like racial hate crimes, but there is. I just want to make sure they're not being said, you know, on social media, and at the same time, it's on like a public space where everyone can see it too, and it's on reflection to the individual. Like I said, recapping, I think there should be a certain amount of censorship on the company, as well as that if things are actually being taken, that's when the authorities can like kind of step in. But obviously, you know, every country's different, and I guess like for a case like Myanmar, the UN can only do so much.
UN can't do anything.
Yeah.
UN won't do anything.
Yeah. But as well as that, like, be smarter as an individual, but at the same time, like, if you can like call, like, don't try to like engage with some of these people, but like just kind of like report and just like
Carry
kinda,
bear spray with you in case you run into one of these individuals.
Yeah.
Gotta stand back, make loud noise, wave your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, yeah, no, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, there's different approaches to, you know, how you go about these individuals, these posts, these things. You can ignore them. I recommend that's the easiest way to do it. Don't give them any more fuel. But if you see something wrong, definitely take action. That's how things get done. Take action. Just know your fights. Know which ones you can and can't win. And you know, finally educate yourself. Don't be sheeple.
There we go.
Yeah, so I think we all kind of just have the same idea of just if you see something you don't like, block it, unfriend them, protect your peace of mind first. And if it's something that's really extreme, just block it, because I think these companies, if they get enough heat, they will do something to progressively change. So I'm glad we are going in a more progressive, I don't know if progressive is the word, but they are doing better at trying to kind of just block things that are like wrong or misinformative. But it's also just do what you can to protect yourself as well.
Sweet.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll have a spinoff on this, or like a part 2. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like this.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, everybody. This is Brooklyn signing off.
Taco signing
And
off.
Kumba.
Thank you for joining us. It was a
Of
pleasure
course.
having you.
Thank you for having me.
This is us signing off.